Hello, and welcome to Conversations to Inspire, where I hope that we can have some conversations that will inspire you to follow your dreams or change what needs to be changed in your life and really find your groove in whatever way that looks for you. I'm your host, Kim Adams, and today we have Georgia Foster with us. And Georgia is a clinical hypnotherapist and voice dialogue trainer. She has an alcohol reduction program, and she is an expert in that area, having worked in the UK and Australia, and has written many books and developed online self-help programs for self-esteem, anxiety, emotional overeating, and drinking. Georgia's been on many different types of media, including TV and newspaper magazines such as the Times newspaper, The Morning Show, and Good Housekeeping. So welcome, Georgia, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So I think I came across you somewhere on my social media feed, and I was really intrigued because your post had the title, "Most people aren't alcoholics, they are emotionally conditioned drinkers." And that really, that made me think, because I think alcohol, as you know, in Australia is such a part of our culture,
Culture.
our social, how we socialize. And so I just really wanted to dig into that a little bit more. And what do you mean by emotionally conditioned drinkers?
Well, I believe that most people are not alcoholics. It might be a little bit controversial, but I believe, well, my slogan is, it's the thinking before the drinking that's the problem. And when somebody, like I like to drink. So I want people to say that my program and how I work is not about not drinking. I know there's a lot of big sober programs out there, and I think that's fantastic. But it's not my journey, and it's not been my clients' journeys. So what I discovered many years ago when I had a clinic in London, a lot of people were coming to see me, bankers, lawyers, homemakers, and they were coming to see me about stress and anxiety, insomnia, low self-esteem. And they'd say to me, "Oh, Georgia, while you're hypnotizing me, can you help me with my drinking?" And I'm like, "Well, actually, that's part of the problem. I mean, the drinking's the secondary issue. The first issue is what's going on in your mind first." And I was also at the same time very annoyed is probably a calm word. I felt very passionate about my clients because being a drinker myself, the shame and the embarrassment and the guilt. And I'm thinking these people are fully functioning. They run normal lives. They have busy jobs. They have children they're rearing, and they're not alcoholics. And yet a lot of them felt that they were because of the media, and that if you've got a problem with drinking, you have to quit. So knowing what I know now, and obviously on my journey, and specializing in this great psychology, which I'd love to share with people today if we have time, is that a lot of this thinking was automatic, right? Because if you're stressed, you think about drinking. If you're bored, I mean, a lot of people can have really busy lives. And then as soon as they get home, they live on their own, and then they'll have like what I call a solo party. And they drink because it's something to do, right? And there may be an emotional conditioning to it, but equally it's just as much a habit. And that, you know, I think that most people in Australia and around the world who like to drink, sometimes, when you're in your 20s, you think, oh, it doesn't matter if I get drunk, it's pretty cool. Get to your 30s and it's a bit like, well, I need to be a little bit more responsible. And then when you get to your 40s and your 50s and you really want to have longevity and you want to feel successful and you want to reach some certain goals, and you realize that that alcohol issue that you had when you were younger because you were socially shy or you were anxious or you have a problem sleeping, then actually has become a little bit more tricky and complicated. So for me, calling it the emotionally conditioned drinkers, it's a syndrome that overthinkers have. But what a lot of people don't know is that when we drink alcohol, dopamine kicks in. So what a lot of people are doing is that it's not the alcohol that's the issue, it's the chemical reaction. And that's really the key thing, is training someone's mind to be more intuitive, to be more calm and be more centered before they drink, so that they're not reaching for that medicinal, emotionally based drink. And I think there's a very big difference between an alcoholic and the people I'm talking about.
Yeah. And I really love that distinction because I think what we see spoken about in terms of alcohol consumption is really a black and white sort of idea. If you're drinking too much, or whatever you feel is too much, then you might have a problem with alcohol. You're an alcoholic. Whereas this is really sort of looking at your life more holistically rather than just purely, I'm drinking the alcohol, but what might be leading up to drinking the alcohol, those emotional conditions, so to speak, that sort of create those habits. And I know that I've been in that situation, probably trying to deal with stress and anxiety and the workload, where the drive home or the train ride home, you're thinking about that first drink. And then you start to get a little worried. Am I an alcoholic? So how do we know what makes an alcoholic different to someone whose response to stress or anxiety is drinking?
I mean, it's a good question, and it's a question that a lot of people have different answers. I mean, my belief is that an alcoholic, generally, there's been some sort of trauma in their past. I do know that children who start drinking at a very early age when their brain isn't fully functioned may be predisposed to that because of the way that the brain develops over teenage lives and etc. Over those years. The main thing is that if somebody, I mean, there are people who do need to quit, and I don't think they're actually alcoholics. There's a particular personality trait called the perfectionist who's all or nothing. They kind of can't do the middle ground of drinking. I mean, I help people with that particular personality trait, but they're really good at abstaining, but they're equally very good at doing it really, really well. So they're quite perfect at drinking to memory loss. They are very highly driven people. And in the end, the shame then makes them feel they need to quit. But I don't believe they're alcoholics.
So
Um,
is that someone who is sort of like one drink's, what's that saying? One drink's not enough and like one drink's too many or something,
yeah,
that it's either all or
yeah.
nothing.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's right. And it's really the what's really interesting about when we drink alcohol. So an alcoholic, I believe, is the alcohol becomes more important than their life, their family life, their
Mm.
career, their stability, their their emotional well-being. I do think there are people who are in that category, and I think it doesn't take much. So there's a really interesting story about this guy who was on HBO and he lost everything and he'd never had a drink. And somebody said, oh, here's a rum, something. And he had a rum. And I was like, whoa. And he just got really addicted to it. But he was in a very highly traumatized state. And so,
Mm.
how the mind works, it works on emotions. And so, if you are in a highly charged state over a period of time and you use alcohol as your fix, then your mind will assume when you experience that emotion or something similar that that's how you deal with it. Now, obviously, the people I'm talking about are not in that situation. They're just, you know, running their lives crazy, crazy busy, and they have trained their mind to use alcohol as that emotional space to go to. So I think, what people need to honor is, I mean, I like wine, people may like beer or whatever it is their choice. But I think we need to stop demonizing and making people feel guilty about it. Because a lot of the drinking we're talking about is chopping the vegetables. You think, oh my God, where did that half bottle of wine go? Where have I been?
Mm.
Right?
Mm.
Or at the computer doing emails late at night and think, where did those 3 beers go? Where was I? And a lot of it is very unconscious automated drinking. And that's a lot of what I talk about and I help people train their minds to tune out of. Is the automated drinking is a bit like when you realize people say, well, I didn't smoke a packet of cigarettes today, but actually they did. They don't remember because it's on autopilot. And so a
Sort of
lot of
like
people,
when we, again, probably when we might be feeling anxious and you open up a packet of chips intending to eat a couple, and then suddenly the bag's empty and it's like, I didn't intend to do that. I had no intention. And now there's that whole guilt that, again, I've scoffed a whole bag of chips. It's sort of that automatic, almost like we can't remember doing it at all.
and that's really what I'm talking about. A lot of the drinking is very
Mm.
much about not being present. And I think that's, from a meditative point of view, I mean, hypnosis is the same as meditation. But I think that we really, you know, and I don't mean this being judgmental about people who overeat, because I used to have a food issue, but it's more to do with the fact that food's kind of acceptable in a way because, you know,
Mm.
it's okay to overeat, but to overdrink is not. And I think that's part of the problem, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm saying is there's nothing wrong with, over over drinking, but it's maybe now and again it's fine, like going to a lovely fine dining restaurant, you have a bit more wine or champagne or a cocktail. But I'm talking the drinking I'm talking about is the regular home drinking, like for entrepreneurs or mums, whatever it is, or parents, or people who executives who are traveling, and just realize that alcohol has become their go-to as their down tools at the end of the day. And it is really automated. So much of it is automated.
Mm.
And then when people have an alcohol-free day, they realize, oh, it's a bit of a challenge because they're so used to having that drink as their moment to punctuate the day.
Sure. So it's really taking it from being a mindless activity to a mindful activity where you might be choosing to have a drink, and that's perfectly okay, as opposed to really kind of zoning out and not realizing that you're actually making those habitual choices. So you talk about the perfectionist. I think I remember reading there was a couple of other different types. You have 3 different types of emotionally conditioned drinkers. What are the other types? And people might see themselves in
Yeah,
those types.
that's really so. The psychology I'm trained in is a fabulous Jungian psychology, and I learned it many, many years ago when I had food and alcohol issues. And I need to say to people that I do have the odd hangover. I'm like, so we were joking the other day about, when there's a wedding on, it's a free bar, and people just go a bit crazy, maybe social anxiety, and they drink too much. But but really, it's about understanding the drivers to drink. And this psychology is very helpful in terms of the theory is that we're all made up of many parts or sub-personalities, and there's one particular personality trait that drives us to drink, and it's the inner critic. The inner critic part is the part that is negative. It says, "Why did you say that in this meeting today? What's wrong with you? Everybody's slimmer than you, taller than you, manage their alcohol better." It's pretty incessant with people who have high levels of anxiety and low self-esteem. And the inner critic, what it does, it uses your memory or your history. I call it histrionics of life. And so every time you try to make a change consciously and you say, right, today I'm not going to drink, or today I'm going to cut back, or this week I'm going to be really healthy, I'm going to have 2 or 3 alcohol-free days, and all of a sudden it doesn't work, it's not because you don't have willpower, it's because the inner critic is using your references of the past as, but this is not how we do that. So your
Mm.
conscious mind is making these decisions, but the deeper part of your mind that manages your emotional habits is saying, well, hang on a minute. We drink when we're anxious. We drink when we're bored. Because a lot of people have a busy brain and they can't sleep at night without having alcohol. And all of these things are like these references in your mind. And so the inner critic will bring up these points of view and say, well, getting hooked into the feelings of having some reprieve. And so what I'm saying is that the inner critic, the bad news is you can't get rid of it. But you can learn to manage it. And the inner critic is the part that is the catalyst to depression, anxiety, procrastination. So a lot of my work, actually, majority of the work, is working hypnotically to train people's minds to tune out of the inner critic. It's the catalyst. It loves external critical people. It loves you failing because the inner critic thinks if you stay in the realm of its world, then you won't fail. But
Mm.
neuroscientists would confirm this, that this, some people, I call it for my children, the grumpy monkey, right? Is or they call the devil on the shoulder and the angel on the other, is there is a part within all of us. It's called the intuitive part. It's the part that's inspired. It's the part that's motivated. It's the part that knows this isn't the truth. But it needs to be massaged. It needs to be exercised in the mind before it can be more present. So the inner critic knows that there are other references. And that's what hypnosis is really about. It's training the mind to build more references that support having a choice rather than just constantly going to the inner critic side of things. And the mind's very lazy. It will just do what it thinks it's meant to do. And if it's meant to drink this way, it will continue that behavior. So people say to me, Georgia, I don't have any willpower. I say, no, you've just got a strong inner critic and a mind that's got a memory of how to use emotions in a particular way and how to deal with them with alcohol. But that's not set in stone. That's just not the truth.
Mm. That really makes a lot of sense, that whole idea of the alcohol quietening the inner critic. I think I can really relate to that because I have that sort of mind that's constantly, feel like I'm in constant judgment mode of what I'm saying, what I'm doing, thinking about what's coming up. I find it very difficult to quieten my brain. And I think I can really relate to that when there's alcohol involved, that kind of goes away. So that's where I guess you have that social anxiety. It can help with that because it stops that voice that's going, oh, those people don't want to talk to you, or am I saying the right things? Do I look the right way? It sort of quietens that enough. And so then that becomes the path of least resistance when you want to feel that way. It's like, oh, that's a simple way of getting there. Mm. So
Mm.
so
Yeah, and
there's
there's another
go on, sorry.
the yeah, the inner critic and obviously the perfectionist we talked about. And the
Yep.
perfectionist is the part that can go to a party, training for a marathon, and won't drink, will stay on the water all night. But then there's another part called the pleaser. And the pleaser is the part that says yes to everybody, has a fear of saying the word no. And they go to a party on Saturday night when they're like trying to abstain for the month of whatever from alcohol. And they will give in because they're worried about offending the host. They're really worried about not being
Yeah.
liked. They're really worried about being rejected. So the pleaser personality trait is notoriously bad at not being able to say the word no. So they
Mm.
use alcohol as their communication crutch, as their, often this passive aggressive behavior comes from a very strong pleaser. And often the pleaser will communicate to the wrong person after a few drinks about, all these things that have been building up in their mind about how unfair the world is and how they've been walked over and how this happened or whatever. But ultimately, it's really about pleasing you and starting to take ownership for that responsibility. Now, pleasers are great because they're free therapists, they're good friends, but they could also attract narcissists, bullies, because
Mm.
pleasers, they want to be always liked. So they always think what's wrong with me first rather than what's wrong with the other person. And pleasers tend to be the regular heavy drinker, whereas the perfectionists will be, I'm on it or I'm off it, right?
Right.
Nothing
Yeah.
in, and you can be a bit of both. I don't want anybody to assume that they're definitely down this track or this track. The inner critic kind of is the umbrella, and then you've got these particular personality traits, and you can be a real mix and match. Like maybe in your personal life you're much a pleaser, but in your professional life you're really driven. But they all have their drinking habits, and so my program, which is called 7 Days to Drink Less, is really about training your mind to tune out of all this habit think, all these kind of moments where you think it's me. I'm saying it's not you. It's just a habit at
Mm.
the end of the day.
Mm.
It doesn't, there is no foundation to this. It's just the histrionics of your life think that this is normal thinking.
And that is a really hopeful approach because it's really coming back to that again, it's about choice. And once you can become aware of those thoughts or those emotional feelings that are coming before the drinking, then you get to make a choice, as opposed to if you're not aware of it, then that choice is gone almost and the habit kicks in. And so it
Yeah,
only
I think
takes 7 days to start changing that habit process in the brain,
oh, well, it's actually even faster than that. I mean,
right?
hypnosis is a really powerful tool. I mean, the great thing is in the day when I first trained like 28 years ago, it was all seemed a bit hocus pocus. But now, I mean, the neuroscientists have
Mm.
come, I mean, there's just so much evidence. It's such a powerful tool. And it's not that it's a lazy approach, it's actually going to the core of these habits, these emotional habits. And I'm not suggesting that you're going to have a picture perfect life because you've managed your inner critic. It is really about managing it. But it's really about understanding that we're all vulnerable. We all have moments where we feel challenged and that, if the default button is beer or wine or gin and tonic, then the default button can be something else. It doesn't have to be alcohol.
Mm.
But you've got to explain that to the deeper part of the mind where all of your emotional habits are stored. And that's really, I mean, hypnosis is the same as meditation. The only difference really is that meditation is kind of, the expectation is on you. Whereas with hypnosis, I'm kind of taking that person on a journey so that they can just relax and drift with their eyes closed. But within 25 minutes, you can make some dramatic changes.
Okay.
It's such a powerful tool. And it's very much more, I'm very much about progressive therapy rather than regressive, because we've all been there. We know what it's like to feel those feelings. So why reignite those feelings? I mean, I'm very pro therapy, talking therapy. I think it's great for a lot of people. But a lot of the people, why I decided to create my program, was clients who were saying, Georgia, I'm so sick of this thinking. I'm so sick of this drinking. I'm so sick and tired and bored of
Mm.
feeling like this. I'm over it, right? I'm like, I get it. I'm a busy person, everyone's in a hurry. So it's really about saying, well, where you were with your emotions, that I want you to understand that your relationship with alcohol at the time, it was the right thing to do because your mind assumed it was right. But now there's another way of thinking. It doesn't have to be this way. It's about really taking the pleasure back into drinking, the taste of it. And a lot of people say after the program, they say, I had no idea that I didn't even like Sauvignon Blanc. I just sculled it right down, and now I realize actually I prefer a Chardonnay or a Shiraz or something. It's really about becoming more of a connoisseur and managing your life in a better way before you drink.
I've found my challenge with managing drinking is I've become a much more expensive drinker now because of those very reasons, because I've now disconnected a bit of that drinking that was happening in that habitual way to stress or anxiety or the social anxiety. And I'm still making the choice to drink because I do still like a drink. Is I want that drink to be a good one. I want to enjoy it. I want it is about the experience. So now alcohol's costing me a lot more. This is not good. But so if someone is wanting to start to examine their drinking, so for me, I think I started examining it with menopause coming on, where I still enjoyed a drink, but it seemed that alcohol did not enjoy me anymore, and it was becoming more of a problem to have a drink. It was not being able to sleep. It was actually increasing anxiety. Hangovers were much worse. So I started to examine my drinking habits and wanting to cut back for those reasons. So what would be some of the things besides doing your course, which sounds like that's a really great way for people to really jump in and kickstart that change? What could they start to do, some of the questionings or self-reflections that might help?
Yeah, I think it's really understanding what's going on in your head before you drink. What's your inner critic saying to you? Because I guarantee it'll be really mean.
Yeah.
And understanding that it's just one voice is not the truth. The good news is the inner critic cannot see into your future. It doesn't have a crystal ball. It will pretend it has a crystal ball, but it doesn't have a crystal ball. So that would be one of my suggestions. The other thing is that a lot of people who are drinking alcohol, just watch during the day. Are you hydrated? So if you're drinking a lot of tea or coffee, which is a diuretic, caffeine is a diuretic. Um, are you drinking enough water during the day, especially if you drink Coca-Cola or drinks that really do dehydrate you? Because when you have your first drink, let's say have a big, big glass of water before your first drink, because if you are dehydrated and you may not be aware of it, because dehydration is something we're not really kind of familiar with, um, when you drink that alcohol, the brain thinks that that liquid, which is the alcohol, is going to hydrate. And so people
Mm.
quickly, right? I'm saying, well, actually, hang on a minute. Your brain thinks it's going to hydrate you. So it's really important to hydrate yourself. I call it DOWO, drink one, water one. Hydrate yourself as much as you can while you're drinking so that at least you're combating and supporting the liver and the digestive system to transport that alcohol through your system and help you recuperate. But I agree, the same thing happened with me going through menopause, insomnia,
Mm.
just couldn't quite, drink as much as I used to, and even I notice, I mean, I can't go anywhere near red wine now at all. It's
Mm,
funny. I
I
think
hear you.
hormonally you change.
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't. I mean, red wine was what I used to drink all the time, and I can't go anywhere near it now. It just makes me feel so ill the next day. So I think it's about going to see your natural practitioner or seeing somebody and just support your hormonal balance with ways because alcohol. This is the tricky thing about it. When we drink alcohol, we drink too much, we wake up with that. We think, oh, we've run away from the inner critic while we're drinking, but the next day, the booze blues comes in, the anxiety. What did you say last night? You may not remember, da da da. Or even if you do remember what you said, the camp can really trigger a lot of anxiety
Mm,
and negative thinking is all through the day. And then somebody says, I need to drink to relax again, to get away from it. So this vicious cycle of continuing to drink occurs. So it's very much about, taking ownership and saying, well, incorporating alcohol-free days into your life so you're not constantly feeling battled with the booze. Like, I'm anxious, but now I need to drink to relax kind of thing. It's kind of getting off that treadmill of thinking. But definitely, I mean, hormonally we change, I think it's every 7 years. I'm not sure exactly the numbers, but it is a big thing for a lot of women.
yeah. Yeah. So where can people find out about your program, Georgia?
If they just go to my website, which is georgiafoster.org, and you'll see 7 days to drink less there. If you wanted a more extensive program, there's the 6-week boot camp. But really just trust that in 25 minutes you can make a change. And
Mm,
everything I'm talking about today is in the program with the 7 days and is amazing. It's just about, my belief is it's the thinking before the drinking. As I said, that's the problem. It's the self-esteem. It's the self-doubt. We need to start to really honor and respect ourselves a bit more so that when we do drink, we're drinking for fun rather than, running away from life.
exactly. So, yeah, and it's different. I find it really interesting if I'm drinking from a relaxed frame of mind. I don't seem to have the same physiological impact as if I was drinking when I'm feeling stressed and I'm drinking to try and, you know, deal with the stress. So I think there is that self-acceptance that happens and that enjoyment, which does physiologically change the whole experience.
Without a doubt, going to a lovely restaurant and having some champagne and the whole, it's the humdrum of life when you're drinking to get away from that. If you're using alcohol as your social pill or your party
Mm,
animal moment, it's very important to find some other, without sounding cliche, it is really important to find other ways to bring in that energy so that you're not relying on alcohol to have that fun or that spontaneity or that sense of being in the moment,
wonderful.
important.
All about choice. And I think whenever we have choice with what we do, it has a better outcome all around. So thank you, Georgia. Thanks for sharing your wisdom today and experience. And thanks for sort of, in a way, almost it's about having permission to go, well, actually, I don't have to be all or nothing. I don't have to give it up. I have to just be able to make better choices that support me to have more fun in life, whether that's with a glass of wine or without a glass of wine. So I will put the website in the show notes down below so people can go and check out more about that. And thank you very much, Georgia.